The curse of Ham is a dangerous myth. It has been used to justify racism and slavery by white racists and some churches for centuries. This interpretation is a misreading of the Bible. It twists the original meaning of the text in Genesis. There's no biblical basis for using this passage to support racism. The Bible is often misinterpreted to justify one's agenda. This is especially true when people want to justify their own prejudices. The curse of Ham is a prime example of this. It is a tragic example of how Scripture can be manipulated to justify the 17th century slave trade. We need to understand the true meaning of this passage. We must reject the racist interpretations that have been forced upon it. Only then can we begin to heal the wounds of the past. We can then move forward in unity and love. The story of Noah's curse is found in Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 through 27. Noah, drunk from homemade wine, is lying uncovered in his tent. Ham, his son, sees him and tells his brothers. Shem and Japheth respectfully cover their father. When Noah wakes, he curses Canaan, Ham's son, to be a servant to Shem and Japheth. This passage has been misinterpreted to suggest that Ham's descendants, particularly people of African descent, were cursed. However, the curse falls specifically on Canaan. There is no mention of skin color or race in the passage. The reason for Noah's curse is unclear. It may be linked to Ham's disrespect for his father, or it could be due to some other transgression not mentioned in the text. What is clear is that the curse is not about race. Since all human were black Africans at that time, it is about the actions of individuals and their consequences. Sadly, the story of Noah's curse has been used to justify terrible things. During the transatlantic slave trade, slaveholders used this passage to argue that Africans were inferior. They claimed that Africans were destined for servitude because of the curse on Ham. This interpretation is completely unfounded and morally reprehensible. The Bible condemns slavery in many other passages, for example, Exodus 21:16, NIV. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or still in the kidnapper's possession. In addition, in Exodus, the progenitors of Shem, the Jews, are enslaved by the Egyptians. The progenitors of Ham and later the nation of Shem are scattered throughout the world by the Romans. Using the Bible to justify the slavery of Ham's descendants is a further contradiction of a curse on Ham, since Ham's descendants were Egyptians enslaving the Jews or the sons of Shem. We must remember that the Bible was written in a specific historical and cultural context. We cannot interpret it through a modern lens without first understanding its original meaning. Section 4. Skin color in the Bible. Temporary symbols, not racial divides. The Bible does mention skin color changes. However, these are temporary and symbolic. They are not meant to be interpreted as permanent racial markers. For example, in Numbers chapter 12, verse 10, Miriam is struck with leprosy and her skin turns white as snow. This was a punishment for her disobedience. It was not a permanent change to her race. Similarly, in Exodus chapter 4, verses 6 to 7, God gives Moses the power to turn his hand white as a sign to the Israelites. Again, this was a temporary change. It was meant to demonstrate God's power, not to create racial divisions. These examples show that skin color in the Bible is often symbolic. It is not meant to be taken literally as a basis for racial classification. Section 5. The Black People, a historical perspective. The descendants of Ham lived in the land identified as Israel and Palestine. They were conquered by the Israelites centuries before the transatlantic slave trade. The curse on Canaan, if it was a curse on the Canaanites, was fulfilled in ancient times. It has nothing to do with modern racial categories. It is a historical event, not a justification for modern racism. Using the curse on Canaan to justify racism is like using the Roman conquest of Gaul to justify colonialism. It is a misapplication of history and a distortion of Scripture to apply a curse on Ham. Section 6. Rejecting the curse of Ham, embracing truth, confronting racism. The curse of Ham. To justify the mistreatment of blacks is an egregious misinterpretation of Scripture. It is a dangerous and harmful misinterpretation of the Church's justification of slavery. There is no biblical basis for using this passage to justify racism or slavery. We must reject this interpretation and all other forms of racism. We must stand up for the equality and dignity of all people. The Bible is a powerful tool for good, but like any tool, it can be misused. It is our responsibility to read it carefully, understand its context, and reject interpretations that contradict its message of love and justice. Let us work together to build a world where the curse of Ham is remembered only as a cautionary tale. It will remind us of the dangers of misinterpreting Scripture and the importance of fighting for justice and equality for all.